Before we really get started, I can already hear some of you niggas typing already after you got triggered by the thumbnail and the title, so let me go ahead and clear the air right from the start. I do not give a fuck about the Admiral versus Yonko debate. I think it truly is a lot more nuanced than some people want to make it out to be, and you'll see some of that reasoning in this video. I've said it multiple times in other videos and on stream. That is my genuine opinion. I love Luffy. That rubber crackhead changed my fucking life. I think Whitebeard is one of Oda's greatest creations. The narrator announcing all the damage he received just to show he never ran away from a fight still gives me chills to this day, and this is 100% a Zehahaha affiliated channel. Anytime Blackbeard does anything shiesty, it brings genuine joy to my heart. Fuck Kaido, fuck Shanks, and Big Mom though. I love Kuzan and Fujitora. Those two are my goats. Kizaru I think had good writing in Egghead, but you know, that's okay. Jury's still out on Akainu for me personally, but overall he's okay too. Fuck Greenbull though. There, see? Not everything has to be tribalism. We are allowed to pick and choose favorites from any faction or group in the story. Oh, and of course, can't forget that Buggy is also a top 5 fictional character ever. But now that that's all cleared up, when it comes to One Piece, and specifically Agenda Piece, I don't think I've seen a group of characters that rile up the entire community more than the Admirals of the Marines. And listen, in Agenda Piece, it don't matter what character it is, best believe there is some kind of slander against them. No one is safe. It don't matter if you're Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, it don't matter if you're even fucking Roger himself. You could be Emu, literally Satan, and people will still find ways to slander you. That is just the honest truth. But specifically, when it comes to the Admirals, the amount of shade and downplay that gets thrown their way is insane. Like to the point where it truly becomes an obsession for some of y'all, agenda brain rot if you will, because it truly doesn't matter what these guys do or what Oda writes in the story. If it's not negative, if it isn't against these guys, some of y'all generally won't process it and will just say nuh-uh over and over again until you convince yourself that the delusion is sweeter than the truth. And honestly, it really does go back to Marineford, because if you've been a part of this community long enough, you know damn well what I'm talking about. It takes 3 Admirals to defeat 1 Yonko. Like, people have been spreading this absolute BS argument for years, unironically, close to a decade to be honest, now that I think about it. And it's because people honestly just don't want to reread the story. You have people who genuinely think that the Admirals needed, keyword, needed to jump Whitebeard to bring him down, and some people will look at you crazy for saying otherwise. Like, first of all, they never even jumped him. Like, Whitebeard had clashes with all of them, yes, but they never came together having a 3-on-1 against him. We really seen what group fights look like in One Piece, like when the Straw Hats fought Oars and Thriller Bark, or the Supernova fighting Kaido and Big Mom on the roof during Wano, or Kid and Law working together to bring down Big Mom. You know, those are genuine team fights. But Whitebeard never got jumped by any of these guys. He clashed with Aokiji first and was about to take a point-blank hit from that man after failing to stab him, but needed Jozu to bail him out. Not that Jozu did anything of note afterwards. He had an actual 1v1 with Akainu where Akainu had his full attention on Whitebeard, and Whitebeard could not land a single hit on this man at all. And then Kizaru just trolls this man the entire time and blasts a hole in his chest. That is literally the long and short of it. That was Whitebeard versus each Admiral at Marineford individually. Not taking a single thing out of context, but again, people have this delusion that he got jumped, when in reality, there isn't a force outside of Emu or Joy Boy who could possibly take down 3 Admirals at the same time. And when it comes to Akainu specifically, it seems like so many people never want to talk about that first fight that happened with Whitebeard, or they just erase it from their memory, because Akainu for one is trying to limit the destruction Whitebeard is causing at Marineford. That stated twice in their battle. Oda makes it clear he isn't trying to see a bunch of damage happen at Marineford, but again, Whitebeard can't land a single hit on Akainu, and because of his health, he has a heart attack mid-fight and ends up getting a hole blasted through his chest, and Akainu just walks away from him. Like, low-key, Whitebeard got saved by the plot, if we're being honest. Whitebeard was so weakened that a bunch of fodder started landing attacks on him, and he was completely unresponsive till he forced himself to keep going. Am I supposed to believe that Akainu wouldn't have been in the perfect position to land a critical or even fatal blow on Whitebeard in this moment? It's never explained why Oda had the most bloodthirsty Marine suddenly back off from finishing Whitebeard, a whole Yonko standing in front of him on his knees. Like, there's no dialogue at all, no nothing. Same guy who kills some other Marines from trying to go AWOL, same guy who would bomb a civilian ship during Ohara just to make sure none of the researchers escaped. Like, if that ain't plot, I really don't know what is. But what about Whitebeard's Quake Fist though? Look how he bullied Akainu. Look how scared Akainu looks. There's always that one guy who wants to bring this up, and again, I have to ask anyone who honestly does this to just go and reread the manga. All that extra fluff never happened in the manga. If you need an anime fluff to make you feel better rather than just what Oda put down on paper, that's already a bad sign. Akainu had his full attention on killing Luffy. Whitebeard sneaks him with the first hit. Akainu retaliates, burning his face off. Whitebeard lands the second Quake Fist and Akainu disappears. But in literally just 2 chapters later, it's about to say that Akainu tunneled underground after the second Quake Fist just to get to Luffy, with the Whitebeard pirates thinking that the man was dead. He literally never got knocked out, but for some reason people want to say that he did. Like, it's just flat out disingenuous. And whenever you bring up that Akainu was still extremely active afterwards, apparently all of that doesn't matter, because apparently there is some unwritten rule that states that we're not supposed to acknowledge a character coming back after withstanding a critical hit, even though this was literally Whitebeard making his second comeback in this arc alone. Like, yeah, it's apparently not impressive for Akainu to take on the rest of the Whitebeard commanders alone. It's not like Akainu wasn't fazed by a combo attack from Marco, one of the most beloved and respected first commanders in the entire story, with Vista backing him earlier. Like I get it. I know a lot of you guys don't like this man, but the reality is he is 100% popping off at some point in the final saga. It's destiny. He is one of the final saga 12. Every single one of these characters is going to have a significant moment in the story before they make their exits. No matter how hard you shake your head no, it's going to happen. And since we're on the topic of those final Saga 12, let's go ahead and talk about Kuzan. I always see people being extremely critical against Kuzan despite being one of the strongest characters in the story. He literally was handpicked by Sengoku to become the next fleet admiral, his chosen successor. He was trained for decades by Garp himself, 2 of the strongest people in marine history. 2 people who were acknowledged by Roger acknowledges the strength of Kuzan. The fact that it took Akainu, someone who is capable of tearing your face off, someone who withstood 2 enraged Quake Fists from Whitebeard 10 whole days to finally bring this man down is insane. And remember that both of them are Logias. No attack that isn't coated with Haki is going to do damage to either of them, meaning they were boxing that whole time with each other. And it's still, at the time of recording, the longest 1v1 fight in the story. Longer than Big Mom fighting Kaido, longer than Roger fighting Whitebeard. But again, that's somehow not impressive, and this isn't in any way to downplay those other 2 fights, because I think they definitely could have kept fighting longer, but just the fact that Akainu needed 10 days to finally put this beast down, and the battle was so intense, it permanently terraformed an entire island. It's not like he had Blackbeard, a whole Yonko, sweating bullets at the thought of having to fight him. A Yonko with the backing of his entire main crew did not want to scrap with Kuzan, despite having one of the strongest fruits in the verse, which has been shown to be a good counter against Kuzan's freezing attacks, despite having the ability to turn off Kuzan's Logia powers. And yes, I get it, you're talking to a die-hard Blackbeard fan here. He is extremely calculating with the fights he takes on. So of course he didn't want to start a needless fight with Kuzan because Lafitte was being stupid. It doesn't change the fact that he didn't want to fight Kuzan despite having the numbers advantage as well as having 2 significant advantages when it comes to their power sets. But then when we get to Hachinosu, just like with Akainu's interactions with Whitebeard, some people seem to have selective reading syndrome when it comes to Kuzan fighting Garp. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to break down how badly Kuzan did not want to fight Garp, one of his oldest friends and mentor, the man he literally looked up to while he was in the Marines. Not that he couldn't have done so, he didn't want to. There is nothing that supports Kuzan going all out in this battle, quite the opposite actually. Garp himself immediately calls out Kuzan for hesitating. We know that having any sort of doubt, loss of confidence, or hesitation weakens you in One Piece. Haki is a power that is determined by one's willpower and resolve. Kaido, for example, one of the most durable characters in the story, someone who with his bare skin can withstand slashes from Zoro and Killer at the start of Root Piece, gets stabbed by the scabbards because of his PTSD with Odin. Are we gonna be shameless and count that against Kaido? No, of course not, because that wouldn't make any sense, because we clearly see him regain his composure later and dominate the scabbards with little difficulty. But when Kuzan has to go up against his mentor who taught him for decades, all of a sudden he's supposed to block out all of his feelings like a fucking robot. Like, Garp had no reason to hold back on Kuzan when they had their hockey clash, because he quite literally is trying to save what he thinks is the future of the Marines. And Kuzan is getting in his way of protecting said future. And even after withstanding that blow from Garp, the first thing out of this man's mouth is concern about Garp's injuries, where he immediately gets called out for being soft by Garp. And if you want to say Garp wasn't going all out despite dedicating his entire life to protecting and upholding the Marines, let's just say because he wanted Kuzan to come back to the Marines at the very beginning of their fight, sure, that is inherently a wrong interpretation, but it changes the fact that he severed his bond with Kuzan completely before they clashed. Why would he still hold back when everything he worked hard for as a Marine is in danger of going up in smoke? Garp on multiple occasions has chosen being a Marine over family and friendships. It makes zero sense for him to have held back by this moment. But you know, screw context, screw nuance, screw character writing, screw all of it, because this doesn't help my agenda. Some of y'all sound like a bunch of cavemen when Oda isn't being subtle with how he is writing these characters with their internal struggles. And you know what? That's honestly a perfect segue to talk about Kizaru and Egghead, because looking back on all of his dialogue and actions in the story, somehow people think he was actually going all out in Egghead when he clearly wasn't. He had multiple opportunities to be the perfect cog for the Marines, as he describes himself at the beginning of the arc, and take out Vegapunk immediately. We clearly see how decisive he is when he isn't hesitating. Man was prepared to go take on Big Mom and Kaido at once if Akainu gave him the order to do so, which, don't misinterpret me bringing this up. Just like how I don't think any Yonko could beat two Admirals at once, I don't think Kizaru could have walked away the winner against Big Mom and Kaido by himself. But the point is that he had the confidence to go and throw hands with two Yonko at once without any hesitation or fear. But then in Egghead, he is so conflicted about having to carry out his orders to take out Vegapunk that he goes so far as to give Luffy the means of regaining his strength after gassing out in their battle just to save Vegapunk. You know, I see it time and time again how people like to bring up the Kizaru meme like it's a gotcha against Kizaru, but don't acknowledge the fact that this meme that you like to spam so much doesn't even happen without Kizaru himself providing Luffy with the means to regain his full power. His words, not mine. Which is also funny to think about too, because even with Kizaru being manhandled by Luffy here and completely ignoring the VV card saying that he lost his will to fight after killing Vegapunk, which occurs immediately a page before Luffy grabs both him and Saturn, keep in mind that Kizaru isn't fresh here when this happens, while also being mentally in turmoil. Again, it's flat out stated by Luffy himself that he is back at full power after eating the food, which is so convenient for Luffy, you know? People like to dunk on Kizaru for getting turned into a pizza, but if you ever bring up the fact that Luffy gets to be back at full power and be dominant against an already weakened opponent who isn't fresh and literally gave him the means of getting back up in the first place, then it's considered cope. Like, I'm sorry, given all the circumstances, I genuinely believe Kizaru's performance was solid despite everything pointing to the fact that he was not at his best here. Being able to completely dominate an arguably stronger and most definitely healthier version of Snake Man Luffy is impressive. Remember, Luffy did eat food and rested for an entire night before engaging Kizaru for the first time, so trying to say that the Seraphim were an excuse to say that Luffy was off his game isn't at all reliable. And we gotta remember too that Kaido needed Future Sight to counter Snake Man, so again, this is a great showcase from Kizaru. His light clones are an incredibly powerful ability, and he's still fast enough to outpace Luffy. Like, I do not care what faction you're under, being able to clash with Gear 5 Luffy, who is actually exerting himself because he is trying to stop you, and be able to keep going after he lands a direct hit with his White Star gun is impressive. I'm not saying Kizaru didn't take damage from the attack, because he 100% did, but as we already know, he was clearly faking not being able to get up and continue. Like, I'm sorry, I can't ignore it. No matter how you slice it, Egghead was not a good indicator of Kizaru's true strength. We got to see more of what he can do and what he can take, that is definitely true, but trying to use the worst day of Kizaru's life as an accurate measure of himself at full power and no hesitation or circumstances holding him back is just extremely silly in my opinion. And speaking of characters who have yet to use their full power, I am so tired of the Fujitora downplay. I've talked about Fujitora in great detail many times on this channel, and I will be happy to repeat it as many times as I need to. There isn't a single time in the entire story where Fujitora actually uses his full strength. That is a fact, not an opinion. He was holding back on Sabo to the point that even Sabo picked up on it and let Sabo go specifically to help in his plans to expose the failure of the Marines in Dressrosa and to a greater extent the entire world. For whatever reason, people call him one of the weaker admirals, and it baffles me because I don't even know how people come to that conclusion. People just keep repeating it over and over again like it's true, despite there being nothing within the story or any SBSs or extra material that state that to be the case. If you really want to see what I'm talking about, take some time to reread Dressrosa for yourself, specifically for every scene Fujitora is in, and you'll know what I'm talking about. He clearly has an agenda of his own on that island. It really is just an assumption that he is weaker than, say, someone like Kizaru, for example. I think it's entirely fair to put Akainu and Kuzan over him because they are fleet admiral level fighters, but we unfortunately have never seen Fujitora use his full strength. There's a misconception that when he drops a meteor, he is going all out or being more serious, but he literally referred to that as just a little test when he first did it against Law and Doflamingo. And then he drops 3 meteors, not 1, 3 meteors while chasing Law and the Straw Hats while eating a bowl of ramen. Like, come on, man, let's be serious here. It's just a matter of perception within the community when they call him one of the weakest admirals. And I think it's very flawed because, like, Akainu ascends to fleet admiral and Kuzan leaves the Marines. So now Akainu is looking for 2 people to fill in Kuzan and his roles as admirals. And despite having actually 2 candidates already there who could possibly do the job, because Gion and Chifton are canon to the story as confirmed by Oda himself in SBS 74 and 75, Akainu looked at Fujitora after enacting the Navy draft and decided to go with him instead, where it's stated that the Marines have become even stronger since Marineford. You know, like, call me crazy, but when the Admirals are considered the Marines' top fighting force, I like to think that a part of the reason why the Marines got stronger post Marineford is because we're recruiting people like Fujitora to their side. And then when he disobeys Akainu's direct orders and attends the reverie, when the revolutionaries attack, he toys with Karasu for a bit, someone who should be weaker than Sabo, who he also toyed with in Dressrosa, and then decides in broad daylight to start helping the revolutionaries free slaves in front of the Celestial Dragons and hold off Greenbull during the reverie. He never gets in trouble for this, by the way. Akainu never once chastised him for this. Garlic never pulled up on Fujitora, Shamrock never pulled up on Fujitora. He literally just gets away with being a traitor and sabotaging the world government in broad daylight. Like, real shit, if he was so much of a liability to the Marines, just fire him. I'm sure Dragon would love that. I'm sure he loved recruiting a Navy admiral who helped his fighters free slaves in the literal domain of the Celestial Dragons. Dragon's mouth would be watering at the chance of letting Fujitora be a revolutionary. Like, real shit, just stop downplaying this man. Betting against the Marine with probably the best moral compass in the entire organization is not going to end well for you. But I can't say the same for Greenbull, however. In terms of having a moral compass, it's probably bottom of the barrel. It sucks too, because I think Greenbull has one of the coolest Logia fruits in the story. I just despise him for being a true Celestial Dragon bootlicker. And he's a bully too. Like, he's actually human garbage in my opinion. But despite my personal disdain and genuine hatred for his character, looking at things from a power perspective, at the end of the day, he is still an admiral. Akainu isn't just giving these spots away to just anybody. Like I said, when talking about Fujitora earlier, Greenbull is one of the reasons why the Marines got stronger after Marineford. Despite having 2 other options at the ready, Akainu does acknowledge the strength of Greenbull as a fighter and chose him to fill in one of the spots left open by himself and Kuzan. In that regard, it really isn't up for debate at this point. And just like Fujitora, we never got the chance to see Greenbull go all out. And just to reiterate again, I personally hate Greenbull. I know this nigga has fans, but if you leave this video knowing anything, please let it be that I am not one of them. But, you know, Greenbull hasn't had the opportunity to really flex his ability against anyone of note in an actual honest 1v1 battle. He goes and bullies King and Queen, who are injured, sure, but I promise you it wouldn't matter if they were fully healed. Maybe saves those two a couple more minutes before getting dogged. We We know an admiral scales above multiple commanders blatantly. Look at the track record of all the commanders or commander tier characters in the story when facing off against an admiral. It is not pretty for the commanders. He bullies the scabbards pretty blatantly, and all Yamato's advanced conquer hockey attack does is just sting him, and then he just goes back to business steamrolling everyone. Even though Yamato was instructed by Momonosuke not to fight anymore, Yamato still insists that they call in Luffy and the rest of the Straw Hats to jump Greenbull, which Momo refuses. And after getting unexpected backshots from Shanks' Conqueror's Haki, he does back off, but as many people have already pointed out, he specifically states that he's not trying to fight the entirety of the red-haired pirates currently, and literally says, not yet. Not that I think that he beat Shanks in a 1v1 to begin with, just in case anyone really needed to hear me say that. And it's really telling though that he goes to Wano specifically to kill Luffy, who is one of the newly appointed emperors. A lot of people like to say that because Kaido's rule was a deterrent that kept Greenbull away from Wano, it is a reflection of the entire Navy, but Greenbull was literally referring to himself in that regard. He has no problem fighting another emperor since, again, he is going to Wano to try to kill Luffy, and we'll clearly see Akainu and Kizaru's discussion on whether to go to Wano or not, and neither mentioned Kaido as an issue in that discussion, so it really is disingenuous to try to use Greenbull in that way when discussing the other admirals. However, I will give Greenbull his credit for getting some hits in on Fujitora. Even though Fujitora was playing defense protecting slaves from him, like defending a bunch of helpless slaves from a guy who can sprout dozens of vines that can drain your life away really quickly is a tall order for anybody. But again, I don't think it's reflective on Greenbull or Fujitora's full strength. Again, Fujitora was on the back foot having to keep slaves alive while dealing with an upset admiral, and it stated multiple times that if it wasn't at Mary Joa, the admirals would have been able to quickly take out the revolutionaries, but they were restricted, or at least Greenbull was extremely restricted. Trying to use Akainu saying no excuses doesn't work either when we, as the audience, didn't even know the full extent of the reverie until 30-something chapters from that point. Like, I don't know about you, Akainu, but one of your own men being an actor traitor in broad daylight could be why things didn't really work out for the Marines during the reverie. I think that might be a fair excuse, but hey, that's just me. All I'm saying is that Oda really goes out of his way to make a bunch of roadblocks specifically for the admirals. I don't think any other group or faction get hit with as many obstacles or plot restrictions than the admirals, and because of that, they get some really disingenuous arguments thrown their way, like for sure not the Yonko. Oda does not give these guys even half the caveats that the admirals have to face. Nothing of the sort for the revolutionaries. The Holy Knights just flat out suck. You know, outside of Shamrock, who Oda is saving specifically for later, these guys are actually just terrible and useless unless they get a boost from their sugar daddy Emu. The Gurusei honestly just choked in the playoffs, but I'm certain we will see more of them in the future being Emu's direct underlings. But when it comes to the admirals, they get plagued with dumb decisions, a dozen mental nerfs, literal sabotage within their ranks, or just being in locations where they aren't allowed to use their full strength. But considering that the 5 main admirals will all likely be fighting major battles later in the story, especially for Akainu and Kuzan, I'm sure they will have moments to showcase their full strength against powerful characters in the future. But tell me, what do you guys think in the comments below? Do you think some of the points I made are fair? Do you think I'm just full of shit? Let me know. Like, it's an Admiral video. I'm not expecting the comment section to be sunshine and rainbows down there. And also shout out to Tiberius again for the amazing work on the thumbnail. Link to all of his socials in the description. And if you like what you see, then consider subscribing for more in the future. Hope you have a great day, and please stay safe. Peace.